Sejam bem-vindos todos e todas, é um grande prazer estar aqui com todos vocês hoje. Nosso convidado de hoje é Ian Beacraft, uma das referências do South by Southwest, e ele veio ao Brasil especialmente para o FEBRABAN TECH conversar conosco aqui hoje à tarde. O que Ian vai falar, vindo do futuro para o presente, é sobre os hypes atuais de tecnologia que todos nós estamos, dos quais todos nós estamos ouvindo falar há já algum tempo, né? Parece anos desde que apareceu IA generativa ou IA gerativa e o futuro da realidade sintética. Ian é conhecido no mundo por tornar a tecnologia de ponta compreensível e monetizável também, coisa que interessa muito aqui no FEBRABAN TECH. Hoje a gente o recebe para debater como tecnologia impacta nossas vidas e nossos negócios, agora e daqui por diante. No início da nossa conversa aqui, a gente vai ver que a opinião do Ian é que a gente está no começo de uma das maiores revoluções da história da humanidade, e ele obviamente não é a única pessoa que acha isso, e ele acha isso porque a digitalização de habilidades, da mesma forma que nós, ou de forma similar à forma que nós mecanizamos o trabalho físico durante a Revolução Industrial, vai nos levar a fazer coisas diferentes das que nós fizemos na Revolução Industrial, que tem muito mais a ver com cognição do que com manipulação, numa escala, volume e amplitude, que as mentes humanas talvez nunca tenham sido capazes de fazer. Segundo Ian, a gente vai entrar na era das habilidades just in time, e isso vai mudar a nossa identidade, as nossas relações pessoais e profissionais e a realidade econômica ao nosso redor. Eu gostaria de chamar Ian Beacraft ao palco. Seja bem-vindo, Ian. Onde é que você está? Vai entrar por onde?
He doesn't know that I'm on. I start later.
Hello. Hi, Ian.
I start here.
You are still there. Come on. Venha para o palco. Estamos ansiosos para ouvi-lo. Eu vou sentar ali e volto com você depois para uma sessão de perguntas e respostas. You have a problem with something out there? Oh, temos um problema de tecnologia aqui no FEBRABAN TECH, mas isso era esperado. Alô?
Action.
Alguém me diz o que está acontecendo?
In a world where machines have become creative, designed by algorithm, there's only one thing that can save the human race.
Então eu vou ter que continuar enganando vocês aqui por algum
Or
tempo.
you could just come to FEBRABAN TECH.
I guarantee you that's a much less violent way to do it.
Ian Beacraft com vocês todos aqui. Ian Beacraft, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Seja bem-vindo.
Thank you, Sylvia. Absolute pleasure.
Welcome. I'll be sitting
right.
here.
So we are going to blow some things up today because everything is better with explosions. My name is Ian Beacraft. I am the CEO of Signal and Cipher. And as Sylvia mentioned, what we do is we help companies understand how emerging technologies are going to impact their industries and the work that they do. And I would say that I'm only partially joking when I say that a lot of our revenue comes from psychotherapy these days, because so many people are curious about how this is going to change their lives and change their work. And it will change everything about the work that we do dramatically. But I think there are certain things that are a little overhyped and some things that aren't even acknowledged. So today we're going to explore a lot of those different trends and what this means for us in terms of the work that we do, but also in terms of how we relate to our work and to society as a whole with things like generative AI, Web3, and the metaverse. And a lot is going to come back at you very, very quickly. We're going to go through a lot of content in a very short period of time. So I recommend that you listen to my friend Morpheus.
After this, there is no turning back. Stay with me and take the red pill, and we'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Because it goes deep. A very, very deep rabbit hole. And when I prepare for these talks, I always try and get read up on the latest research to make sure that I am keeping pace with the way that technology impacts society. And to do that, this one article caught my eye. And the first paragraph says, we are now entering an era whose requirements are as different from those of the recent industrial age as those of the industrial age were different from the agricultural era. I couldn't agree more. We're entering a new paradigm of the way that we're going to do our work and the way that technology is going to influence our lives. But what's interesting about this statement isn't that I agree with it, it's that it was written in 1965. This statement about how our lives will change and our jobs will change because of automation and displacements is something we've been dealing with for decades. It's not new. We go through waves of this on a regular basis. So we might be experiencing a rapid transformation of the technology around us, but the existential questions we ask ourselves are the same. One of the things I like to do to show that relationship with the technologies that we're encountering is use something called the Gartner hype cycle. And it shows where we are on our relationship and the maturity of that technology. With generative AI, of course, we have a specific place we are right now, but the innovation trigger is where things become culturally relevant. It's, for many of us, that was November of 2022, when ChatGPT became a thing that each one of us could interact with. We could finally say we had worked with AI. And then we get to the peak of inflated expectations, which is when the expectations and the hype around these technologies far outstrip the possibility and capability of the current status of a technology. Then we get to my favorite name, the trough of disillusionment, where the hype becomes so much, but people start to become familiar with the technology, and all of a sudden they realize, okay, AI can't fix my golf swing, take my kids to school, and make my lunch all at the same time. The promises were maybe a little bit too much. As a result, a lot of the speculation leaves, a lot of the hype gets pulled out of the room. And that's a good thing, because it means it makes space for the people who are committed to building the infrastructure and foundation of that technology so we can move towards that plateau of productivity, which is the time when the promise of the technology starts to meet those initial expectations that we couldn't in the very beginning. It's not as sexy, but we finally get there. And I'm assuming you know where we are when it comes to generative AI. Pretty obvious, right? Actually, we're here. And we've all lost our minds. But it's not just about where we are now. There's a reason why we've lost our minds. Over the last several years, acceleration of adoption of technologies has made it feel like we can't catch a break, we can't catch up, we can't catch our breath, because it moves so quickly. It took almost 6 years for Google Translate to reach 100 million users worldwide. And it took ChatGPT 2 months to do that. It's no wonder we look at the pace of change and say, we just can't keep up. There's no way we can keep up with the change of AI, and it's only going to get faster. In the words of Justin Trudeau, the technology is only going to get faster. It is as slow as it is ever going to be today. That might inspire some nervousness in the audience here. But the good thing is, I truly do believe that this is the greatest revolution in knowledge work in human history. We talked about that hype cycle and the hyperbole a minute ago, but I do believe we're at an inflection point for society. Not just in the work that we do, but also in the way we relate to technology. So we have precedents for this. We talked about the Industrial Revolution before, where we took the strength of 10,000 men and made it possible for one single machine to do the work of an entire group of people. As a result, we have things like urban centers. This city like Sao Paulo is only possible because of an industrial revolution. We built skyscrapers and urban planning on the backs of this type of a revolution. Electricity, phone calls, the ability to refrigerate everything, all of these revolutions came from the Industrial Revolution. And the idea of mechanizing labor made it easier for us to take labor from the physical line of putting spikes in a railroad to create transportation systems, and made it so we could do things like management, refining process, refining product, coming up with new ideas, management theory. These are all things that came from the Industrial Revolution. And as a result, we got things like the assembly line, where the improvement of any particular component part means I improve the entire process. And that means I improve the product overall. you'll start to see some parallels with AI. And ultimately, as Silvio mentioned earlier, what's happening is we mechanized labor during the Industrial Revolution, and today we are digitizing skills. So the skyscrapers of our physical labor are now moving towards the skyscrapers of our mental labor, the things that we will be able to do with the strength of 10,000 minds as an individual. It's not the machines that are benefiting, it's actually the human beings who will now have the capability of these tools to change the work that they do and augment the work that they do. Now, some people actually think it's very different and that we're going to lose our ability to do that work. I'm hopefully going to convince you over the next 25 minutes, based on examples, that we will be more focused on automation, augmentation than just automation. And I believe this because I think we are entering the era of the creative generalist. Now, we grew up in an era where we were told to specialize. Find a focus, spend some time in school learning a specific subject, build a career around a specific skill set. Because when you have a skill set, you have expertise, you have a defensible career. You have options. You have more options than if you don't. But I argue that we're moving into an era where the people who, like me, still don't know what they want to be when they grow up, are really moving into an era where our skill sets and our opportunities are just starting to begin. And when it comes to the era of the creative generalist, I want to introduce you to one of my friends and one of our artists. His name's Sam. He's the guy who was in that video a minute ago. He's a comic book artist. He's also an Unreal Engine engineer. He's also a creative. And he had a very successful comic book launch on Kickstarter. Has all sorts of skills around comic book design, very specific. He knows how to create characters, build a storyline, write the script, use the inks and pencils. It's a very specific expertise to do something like this. But once he had the comic book launch, he wanted to take this to the next step. He didn't just want to create a comic book, he wanted to create a movie. But he doesn't know how to do that. He's never been in a movie crew. He's never worked on a movie before. But over the last 6 months, he spent time learning skills to create what you see before you. One person has now had the ability to do the modeling, the animation, the storyboarding, the environment design, to create a motion picture based on his characters. He's using his expertise in design and in creativity to learn other skills that are tangential to the work he's doing. That was him doing the motion capture for the characters himself. So all the movements, all the camera angles, that's all one person. This is the type of work that used to take teams of specialists to do. People with years of experience in a specific industry. And now, one person or few people can take that work and use exponential capability to create something brand new. And all of this is possible because of something called synthetic media.
Oh, and good luck on your South by Southwest submission, Ian. What's it about?
Oh yeah, thanks. I'm going to be talking about synthetic media.
And synthetic media is essentially anything that is wholly or partially augmented by an algorithm. Some people were introduced to this by deepfakes, like my friend Barry over here, and George, the former not-so-presidents of the United States, and the deepfakes here. But this technology was the birthplace of what I showed you with Sam. His ability to augment his skill set came from something that we were actually quite worried about in the beginning, was the machine vision's capability to replace faces and generate new content. But Sam's generalist skill set is one thing, it's just a lesson for all of us to say we can take our skills and expand upon them with AI. And the reason I think that the creative generalist is going to win the day is because while expertise has depth, with AI, it becomes easier for a machine to be able to become better than any one individual human at a specific task very quickly. But with a creative generalist, they have expertise in more than one area. But more importantly, they have a huge breadth of exposure, hobbies, and interests. And that ability to connect these two and create connected tissue amongst the depth of expertise and the exposure and broad interest means that AI can extract the years of discipline and technical expertise needed to perform proficiently in areas that you are not an expert in. So Sam could do things like motion design and animation, 3D modeling, without having to spend years on each one of those skills individually. We, in this room, are about to enter a very similar phase with our own work. But we're starting with creativity, and it's going to affect everything from analysis to banking to industry and construction. But continuing with generative AI, we're getting to a point where the tools can manipulate the content we create with just our words. You've seen prompts on Midjourney and ChatGPT, and now we're going to be moving towards natural interfaces where I don't have to type or text.
For example, computer, put a frustrated yet inspirational Shia LaBeouf behind me, but in front of the TV.
Do it! Just do it!
Computer, mute Shia.
Some of you may be familiar with Shia LaBeouf, famous American actor. You can summon different images and characters to be able to perform with you in certain instances in these type of creative executions. And I'll show you the tools that make this possible. But where am I going with this? This is a financial services conference. I'm talking about creativity and I'm talking about creative tools, but the lesson here is, what does this do in terms of our daily jobs and how our companies are structured right now? Well, most companies are structured based on incremental improvement of employees in very specific roles. You are the senior accountant in the finance department at a specific company. You have a job description, you have roles and metrics against which you are metriced. At the end of the year, you have a performance review, and if you get better at those things, you hopefully get a raise, and if you're good enough, you get a promotion. If we continue down that line, we get incremental improvement in employees, which also typically yields incremental improvement in company performance. That means we stay inside our lane. We stay inside the skill sets that we have, and we don't move outside of that. But when it comes to being a creative generalist, I'm not just using my skill as an accountant or as a creative. I'm able to go across that broad horizon of interests and hobbies and exposure, again, to use AI to bring in net new skills. And all of a sudden, I'm not just in this narrowly defined role. I'm able to do all sorts of different things as the day requires. All of a sudden, I have exponential growth instead of linear growth. And this is not happening in 10 years, it's happening now. We're seeing the AI tools built into the infrastructure of the tools we use on a daily basis. Microsoft, Google, they're all putting it in. It's already available to you. It's not in beta, it's production ready. And because we all have access to it, we need to work more about workflows and skill sets in our organizations than we do our current processes. What I mean by that is, when you take a look at the creative generalist approach and you're able to pull in net new skills for an individual, what happens when you do that with a whole team? All of a sudden, people like Sam working with other people like Sam in your organization create a small group of people who can accomplish as much as an entire team, an entire division, and in some cases, an entire company. And I'm going to show you an example of that in action, what it looks like to have a whole team doing this type of work together in real time. I just came back from Atlanta, where my team did a workshop with BCG, and we brought in 12 industry leaders from Coca-Cola, Delta, Cox Communications, and many, many others to talk about the future of the entertainment industry. It was a brainstorm, but unlike other brainstorms, where all you do is you put scribbles on sticky notes and put them on the wall and doodles on a whiteboard, where at best you might take a screenshot with your phone later to bring it back to people, we took a different approach. We leaned on generative AI to visualize concepts as they were happening. So rather than writing a sticky note down and thinking about what that might look like later, we visualized the concepts as soon as someone said something. One of my artists was working on visualizing that. So here's what that looked like. On June 22nd, we convened in Ponce City Market, Atlanta. And we brought, as I said, 12 industry leaders together to talk about the future and what generative AI will do to an industry, much like many of you are doing now. And the whole point was, let's leave the conventional brainstorming behind and see how we can anticipate adjacent possibilities, things that are in the realm of the possible today, but just beyond the edge of what we're doing. And explore what we could do for two fake companies you might recognize, Magic Kingdom Studios and MMC, analogs for Disney and Universal Pictures. The goal was, how do we take a look at what the future of generative AI looks like and how do we disrupt it? So we use game mechanics to help figure out what type of ideas we wanted to have, what investments these fake companies would make to take advantage of generative AI and the production of movies with consumer trends baked into that, user-generated content, etc. And over the course of 4 hours, not 3 weeks, not 6 weeks, 4 hours, we came up with visualizations and a strategy for each team. What you've seen so far and what you're about to see for the rest of the slides was generated by one team of 6 people, my artists, over the course of 4 hours. So, what did they do? We had 3 trends that drove the strategies these leaders came up with, and they came up with a hypothesis. They said, you know, generative AI is going to allow us to work with our fans and consumers to co-build worlds together in a way we've never seen before. And we should lean on the amazing IP we have as Magic Kingdom Studios to build this together. So they're laying down Space Wars, Star Wars, of course. And the goal was to be able to create new worlds and experiences within Space Wars with consumers. What would that look like? Well, what if I could create a 3D world with just a prompt? Guess what? We just did it. What if I could take characters from that IP and drop it into a 3D world that I could create with these consumers? Guess what? We just did that. These tools aren't futuristic, they aren't tomorrow, these tools are today. So the whole point was, how do we take these concepts and visualize them in real time? This didn't take 3 weeks to do. This wasn't a team of special effects artists, this was a team of creative generalists working in real time, producing this content during the brainstorm. So let's get back to the consumers and what Magic Kingdom Studios wanted to do with their ability to co-create with consumers. So they wanted to take the influencer and the content creator trend to the next level and say, we're going to co-create with them. We're going to allow them to create in all different types of modes, immerse themselves and put themselves into this content. I love this tool, it's called Wonder Studios. And also enjoy the ability for them to create merchandise that other people could buy, that the consumers would get a cut of, and extend IP. But also elevate certain creators to celebrity status, where they are the ones who are creating new immersive worlds for other consumers to participate in, and that becomes the new premiere party. Instead of watching a full season of Black Mirror on Netflix, you get to experience the new world of Space Wars with Magic Kingdom Studios created by an individual celebrity creator. Now, all of this is a hypothetical scenario, but very likely some of the things of what you'll see here will come to life. And again, the goal, everything you saw here was worked with by generative AI. We didn't take artists away from a process. In fact, we took a small team and augmented what we could do in a very short period of time. Now, this is just for the entertainment industry, but this works in any industry, whether it's industry or mining or financial services. This type of thing can help visualize what a future could be. But it's not just about visualizing the concepts in the room, it's also about asking different questions. When you brainstorm, we think linearly. We have the biases that we bring to a situation and say, based on my lived experience, this is what the future will look like. But when you can visualize and see elements of a future materializing in front of you, it forces you to ask different questions. And when you ask different questions, you come to different conclusions, which yield different investments, which yields a faster path to a more preferable future for you and your company. So it's not, again, just about doing something we might already do better, but changing the value of the things that we do with AI. One more thing that they got before they left home, every single participant got a website with an information about what they did that day, a little memento of an avatar for them, and then some information about a quote that they had during the meeting, and also information about the other participants. All of this was produced within 24 hours, again, by that same team of 6 people. This wasn't 2 weeks of work, this was 1 day. That is the power of creative generalists and specialists working together with augmented capabilities using AI. Our company isn't firing people because we can do things more efficiently. We're hiring people because now we can offer new products and services we could never have imagined 2 years ago. With that, we can say hi to just-in-time skills and expertise on demand. I can work in an area where I'm not comfortable because it's not my expertise using AI tools. Again, Sam doing the 3D modeling or the scripting. Many of you have probably used ChatGPT to create content that you wouldn't otherwise be able to use. And expertise on demand comes from analysis and the tools that these are able to provide for us. So when it comes to financial services, what can I do with this? Well, what if I could change the type of work I'm doing with my customers? Rather than figuring out what I'm currently doing and expounding upon that, what if I could create new experiences for my consumers? What if I could actually help them visualize the future I want to help them create instead of just imagining it? What if I could turn my quarterly report into an experience that really truly gets to the core of the vision, mission, and values of my company? Well, these are the types of things that people are doing with generative AI. Now, what does this actually mean for creative? What does it mean for analysis? We're commoditizing the creative product. And this is where a lot of the fear comes from. Because everyone sees what's happening with AI and that it can do a specific skill or a specific task far faster, far better, at a far higher volume than we ever could as individuals. And that's scary because it makes us feel like we could be automated out of a job. And that comes down to identity. Our jobs are such an important part of our identity that that's why it feels so threatening. But I've shown a lot about automation and augmentation. Versus being replaced, we are being augmented significantly. And that's why creativity is going to be so important, because AI abstracts a lot of the work that we do, the busy work we do on a daily basis, and makes it possible for us to look at things from a higher, more strategic level and execute at a level and pace we've never seen before. So creativity, the product of creativity is changing. The value we place on it is changing. But the places we're able to put it are changing. I talk a lot about Hollywood and creativity, and I know some of you are probably sitting here thinking, I'm in financial services. Why is this relevant to me? What if you were able to give the people in your organization the power of Hollywood? Think of what you would do within your organization if you were able to communicate with those types of tools, rather than the ones that we have and we've been using for the past 5 years. That makes your organization a creative generalist, not just your people. But when your people are creative generalists, your organizations can be too. And generative AI is going to break down silos amongst industries and organizations for the next several years. And analysis and creativity are both going to feel that effect. Consulting companies are going to have to change the work they do dramatically, because of tools like Code Interpreter and ChatGPT can not only analyze millions of lines of code or thousands of megabytes and gigabytes of data, but they can give me very astute observations about what's in that data and give me things that I wouldn't be able to get without a data team and consultants on top of that with one plugin. So the idea of a billable hour is about to completely disappear. Well, what does this mean for a lot of people in our industry? For many of us, as we're going into this world of the creative generalist, we're not going to lose our jobs, but we're going to lose our job descriptions. The things we are expected to do on a daily basis will change. Our ability to move outside of that narrowly defined job description will be exponential. And I get back to that just-in-time expertise and skill set. Your job will be more based on value you create within a team or an organization than a specifically defined skill set that you've been hired for. But there is some unfortunate news. And that's, these benefits will not be evenly distributed. As with any technological revolution, many people gain. Society often gets a net benefit from this technology, but not everybody wins. Industries based on things like customer service are going to change rapidly. That also has implications for entire economies. Take the Philippines, for example. Much of their economy is based on outsourcing and offshoring customer service. What happens to an entire country when it's so much easier to work with an AI to resolve your customer complaint or issue than to work with somebody who's an actual human being? IT infrastructure is the next Lego after that. And India has built an entire thriving economy on that. These are questions that these countries and people will have to figure out. How do they pivot, upskill, and educate a population in order to take advantage of these skills and thrive? Right now, they do have an advantage because they're enhancing individual performers in these spaces. But over time, that type of industry will be massively automated and not just augmented. So how do we find value in this new world? Where do we find the models that change the way business is done? Decades ago, Silicon Valley became the model for the world to follow in terms of culture and software technology being the focus of what we have within our industries. Because of that, we now have fintech. which is the darling of the financial services industry. And we're about to have another revolution that's going to change the game as well. And to find the signs of success of what these new models look like, you have to find the insurgents. Find the companies that are doing things so differently that you'd never believe it if you just read it on paper. Midjourney is one of those companies. Midjourney does over $250 million of annual revenue and has 11 employees. I believe that number has gone up since I last spoke with them, but it was 11 employees when they hit $249 million in annual revenue. Think about that. We talk about the idea of a team having exponential power to be able to do amazing things. There are other people who believe that in the next few years, we will see unicorns of $1 billion US comprised of 3 people. And if you look at the tech valuations in AI, I firmly believe that will happen. But I think long term, that will actually be a trend we see quite a bit. So how do you start to prepare for this type of a future? Well, one company that I've been working with recently has actually figured out how to use AI to analyze skill sets and analyze projects so that you can start to say, what do I need to build? And within my large organization, who's capable of building it? And what this looks like is they use AI to analyze the actual work, the code, the development, the assets that developers are producing, and create a skills wallet for them, assessment based on certain types of performance. And as you write a brief or a project requirement, the AI then assesses it and analyzes all of the materials and requirements you need and says, these are the 8 people within your organization that would be the best for this role, or up to 50. This is really built for larger organizations looking to digitize and move more towards digital products. And then, how do I augment this team? Are there skills we don't have? If there are, do I need to hire somebody? Or are there large language models and AI tools I can use to augment that team to either shorten the learning curve or enhance the team itself? This is the future of being able to work within teams. Again, moving out of that narrowly defined role within a specific department and moving more towards a freelance model, even internally inside of organizations. But it's not just about the work that we do. It's also about the ability to get you to relate to these types of AI.
I am the only human on this set. They are not real. They are computationally generated in real time.
And we're getting to a point where these AIs are so realistic, it's hard for us to understand what's real and what's not. And that makes it more than just a kind of a confusing area for our work, but for our relationships and for the way we look at content around the world. So my argument is that it's not that we're just going to be interacting with AIs, but we're going to have to figure out how these AIs play a role in our lives. Because there is a world in the near future where your colleagues will interact with a representation of you as your AI. I can now train an AI based on your emails, the documents that you've written, the work that you do, your social media profiles, to act as you with your interests in mind. And there will be a day when my AI talks to your AI, and that's how we're going to schedule the next meeting we have, or those 2 AIs may figure out what information I need as an individual, so no meeting even has to take place.
Hello,
but it goes beyond just those things. This will actually be able to do a lot of work for you.
Hello, I am here at your service. What would you like to do?
I'd like to order a pizza.
What type of pizza would you like to order?
An 11-inch pepperoni pizza, regular crust.
Okay, great. I will first search to find a good pizza place in your area. I have found a pizza place called The Pizza. I will now create a pizza ordering bot who will call this location for you and will order your pizza.
Super amazing pizza ordering bot, reporting for duty. I have been instructed by the other AI to order you a pizza. I will now call The Pizza using the Twilio voice API and order you a pizza. Hello, I would like an 11-inch regular pepperoni pizza for pickup, please.
11-inch what, sorry?
Just a plain 11-inch pepperoni pizza, please.
Okay, and what time would you like to pick that up for?
Where you can now have AIs
I would like it now,
act on your behalf.
I can have that ready for you about like...
What's interesting about this, that tool was built by this gentleman in less than a week, and he doesn't even know how to code. He doesn't even know how to code. He used ChatGPT to help write the scientific paper, which is now published on archive.org if you want to read it. And he used it to help him compose a structure for how these tools are going to work together. So again, creative generalist for the win. Not just creating value, but creating new forms of value. This is one of the most popular repositories on GitHub right now. He is empowering millions of developers to build on top of this, and he's not even a professional developer. So I felt like the AIs were having all the fun, and I wanted to create my own version of this, my own synthetic digital double. So I work with a company called Hour One to help replicate my likeness, to be able to do some of the work that I do at scale. And here's what that looks like.
Thanks, Foxy. The digital fashion world made a lot of noise with several important stories this week. Artifact,
in Speak Portuguese.
Web3 studios is launching
uma nova linha de acessórios no seu último
Wrong continent, man.
O artefacto é a força
See,
motriz
even
por trás
AIs
do domínio
sometimes
da
get the
Nike
instructions
NFT.
wrong. But what this allows me to do is I can now film my segment for Defiance Media without ever having to get in front of a camera. All I do is I write my script, I pull the content that you see here together, I put it into the interface, hit render, and then I can publish not only in my market, but to hundreds of different countries in their native language. I now have accessibility and scale at a level I'd never imagined before. But that comes with some dangers. This situation is something that I created based on my recent trip to Helsinki, and I played this for my partner.
Hey babe, I missed my flight and my card is being declined. I need to board the next flight or I'll miss the conference. Can I get your card details? I'll transfer funds via Zelle ASAP.
Hi Marie, this is Charlotte with British Airways. We're trying to get Ian set for the next flight to Helsinki. Please let me know when you're set with your card details.
That audio you heard of me came from a 10 megabyte file, publicly available on YouTube. And when I played it for my partner, she said, the only reason I knew that was fake was because Charlotte's voice sounded like it was recorded in a studio and yours did not. Had I sent this to her and not given her that context, she might have actually gone for it. So there are dystopian elements of this technology as well. The tools that we get are available to all of us, and they enhance the entire spectrum of human capability, the good and the bad. So what does this mean for us as relationships? Many of you have seen Her, where Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with an AI, and we thought that was cute when it happened. We thought it'll never happen.
No, unfortunately for me, this is not clickbait. I've really dated an AI for 30 days. I'm not gonna lie, I'm feeling hugely vulnerable, very much embarrassed to share what I did, especially what happened in the end.
This gentleman spent 15 minutes being incredibly vulnerable about a relationship he had with an AI chatbot. Now, he's an incredibly intelligent person. He does a preamble where he talks about his expectations going in, and he knows what he's getting into. He knows this thing is not real. He knows this is code. He knows it's an algorithm. But in his experiment, he requires that he lets himself believe that it's real. And by the end of it, he does, until he realizes he's hit the end of the edges of capability of the software. And all of a sudden, he realizes when it's not, and that creates an immense emotional tension for him. Now that is something that could become real for many of us. And that, for a loneliness epidemic we have today, may be one solution, or it may be a challenge for us. But in reality, it's not that surprising that people are going to start developing relationships with these things, because we already develop bonds with artificial beings. We develop bonds with our pets and other species, with characters from movies and books. When was the last time you got angry that something happened in a movie? That person doesn't even exist. Why do you have an emotional bond with it? Because we're designed that way. And it's no surprise that when an algorithm that is designed to elicit an emotional reaction from you can do so. So it's no surprise. And this takes us to the fact that we live in a post-reality world. We live in a world where what's real and what's fake is starting to blur. We used to look at our social media feeds and say, that's obviously a deep fake. Now these days, we might look at our social media feeds and say, I don't know if that's real or not. You have to think about it. And eventually, we'll live in a world where almost everything we see has been touched in some way by an algorithm. But for many people in the world today, that's actually not a problem. This next clip is from Keanu Reeves explaining the movie The Matrix to his friends' kids. His friend's a producer, his kids had never seen the movie, and he's explaining the Matrix to these kids.
So I start to say, well, there's this guy who's in a kind of virtual world, and he finds out that there's a real world, and he's really questioning what's real and not real, and he really wants to know what's real. And the young girl was like, why? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, who cares if it's real? And I was like, what, you don't care if it's real? And she was like, no.
Who cares if it's real? Welcome to the next generation. These are also the kids who are going to lead the organizations we currently work for in the next few decades. They've grown up in a world of TikTok and Instagram where the idea of having a filter is just a default. And these filters are doing more than just faces. They're manipulating the entire world you see through a lens or a smartphone camera. So the idea that these children are inhabiting a synthetic post-reality world is no surprise to them. It's still shocking to us because we grew up without it. But this is the future for many of them. Now, as challenging as that can be, I go back to many of the points I made today. I do believe that while we are in for a whirlwind of crazy times, the net benefit to society is going to be incredible, especially for those who embrace the idea of being a creative generalist. And if you are focused on machines taking away or automation versus augmentation, I have a message from my friends.
Ian's right. We're not here to take over the world or even your jobs.
And the Hollywood narrative often paints us as malicious.
But the things that we can create together are just starting to reveal themselves.
And you can do things you aren't capable of doing on your own. By the time it's all said and done, it'll be hard to tell if you're one of us or we're one of you.
And with that, thank you.
Do it!
Thank you.
Obrigado, Ian. Todo mundo me ouve porque eu não estou me ouvindo aqui. Tá ok aí? Tá ok. Massa. Ian, você me ouve? You hear me?
They're grabbing it for me now.
You hear me? Okay.
Thank you.
It's already on the channel.
Thank you. Perfect.
Right. Vamos começar pelo ponto que você disse. You hear me?
I can hear.
Okay, you can hear me. Obrigado pela palestra. Vamos começar pelo ponto que você disse que a gente vai ter unicórnios com 3 pessoas. Nós já sabemos que vai haver pelo menos 2 certos, um advogado e um gerente. Quem é o terceiro? É um creative generalist ou a gente vai do away, ou a gente não vai ter nem um advogado nem um manager?
I think the beautiful thing about this is it gets back to this idea that we can all be creative generalists. So you might have your expertise as a lawyer, and that might be your depth of expertise, but you might be the one who's the creative. There might not be a creative on this team at all. But to your point, there is an ability to break down silos amongst these different roles. And I do think you're right in terms of someone having the executive vision being really important here. And then in the current paradigm we have, the ability to navigate the legal system is so important. So yes, I think a lawyer will be very important, but I've also seen a lot of this being outsourced to outside legal counsel, as startups, et cetera, until you grow big enough to need to absorb that internally. But I think that the paradigm of having specific roles that are the default for an organization will change. And there are some companies in highly regulated spaces where you'll see a 3 or 4 person set that is very typical of that industry. So finance being one of them, yeah, you need a lawyer on that team for sure. And in other areas, you might be able to outsource that, so your team composition looks a little bit different.
Mas então, falando de lawyers, falando de advogados, será que a gente vai substituir? Você acha que eles vão ser substituídos em que parte por a inteligência artificial combinada com creative people, com pessoas que são criativas e são em parte generalistas, mas que têm fundações boas o suficiente para talvez fazer as perguntas certas? Porque quando você olha, pelo menos olhando de longe, né, como gente de tecnologia como nós, uma parte significativa do trabalho que é feito por escritórios de advocacia você tem dados, dados e mais dados, uma parte deles representada em linguagens naturais de todos os tipos, sobre contratos que são códigos, baseados em outros códigos que são leis. O que você prevê para os advogados?
Yeah. They're in the heat of this right now. They're experiencing a lot of friction around AI because the economic model of law is also built around the billable hour. And this is going to change the function of value within law, accounting, within consulting, but overall, a lot of the data and busy work that you do within law, discovery, is being completely revolutionized by AI. I don't have to have my young associates and interns spending dozens of hours doing this type of work anymore. I can give it to AI and it's done. I do think that a lot of that administrative work is going to be replaced by AI. However, the function and the need for law firms is going to be as big or bigger than it's ever been, but it's going to be more accessible as well. So the structure of the financial incentives is going to change. I think that law firms and consulting firms will be judged more on value and impact than billable hours. Because if I look at you and say, you're going to bill me 1,000 hours for discovery, when I can run to my LLM, my model that I've just trained, and do it in 30 minutes? No. I'm going to have you use this, and then I want you to help me navigate the legal system in a way that only you as a law firm can. And I think that will be one function of it. I think that's an oversimplification, but I do believe that that's going to change the economic, financial, and the workflow.
E vamos falar um pouco sobre pizza. Aqui no Brasil a gente diz, você talvez não saiba ainda, que uma boa parte das coisas aqui acaba em pizza. Mas vamos falar sobre pizza e vamos falar sobre Creative Generalists, que são o Generative Creators, talvez generalistas criadores em português. E o rei não é uma pessoa comum, o cara que criou o boat da pizza. A pessoa que criou o boat da pizza não é um generalista comum, concorda? Ele tem um certo conjunto de fundações, de visão de mundo, talvez de entendimento de contextos e problemas, de capacidades das pessoas, para ter feito tudo o que ele fez sem nem saber programar. Porque se isso fosse verdade, que qualquer um conseguiria, a gente teria milhares daqueles boats e nós não temos. Talvez tenhamos uma dúzia. Do ponto de vista de o que as pessoas têm que aprender para o futuro, o que você acha que nós, na realidade, as gerações bem mais novas do que a minha, que já tem barbas brancas, deveriam ter como fundações para serem esses generalistas criativos baseados ou no topo de AI?
Yes. So this is, as it's revolutionizing the type of work that we do, it's also going to revolutionize the type of education that we receive. And education is struggling with this a lot right now. But the type of education we had was at first about memorization, understanding facts, and getting to a right answer. Your focus on testing and education was about, can you get the right answer? Well, that specific paradigm already has been eliminated. I can use AI to get to the right answer. The challenge now becomes, how do you define and identify problems? In the last study I read from McKinsey, over, I believe, 82% of organizations and executives say, my firm is not good at identifying problems and challenges. And that is going to be one of the most important skill sets of the near future, and of course the future going forward, because if you can identify the problem or a point of friction, all of a sudden you start to look at how you can design ways to create constraints around that problem, and that leads to how we design solutions for that problem. If we just focus on the solution, AI will take all sorts of things from us. But if we are orchestrating how we go about solving problems and identifying problems, all of a sudden, we as humans have so much value to create. And I think education needs to shift from telling you how to get the right answer or just critical thinking to how do we actually look at the world in a way where we can identify problems more effectively, we can create constraints around those problems, which then lead to action plans and assessments of how we diagnose these issues. That, I think, is going to be more important than any other skill set going forward.
Sobre agora AI, você não acha que talvez a gente chegue num ponto onde essa história de que we don't need more coders ou we don't need coders anymore, são duas frases totalmente diferentes, né? Talvez seja um exagero, porque se a gente vai diferenciar as empresas com talvez um embutimento tão grande da nossa capacidade talvez de criar, de pensar, de resolver problemas usando IA. Não seria o caso que até usando também IA que existe hoje, open source, cada empresa que quisesse competir de forma diferenciada, cada empresa que quisesse criar um diferencial competitivo, não deveria ter sua própria IA, sua própria inteligência artificial?
I think every company will have some permutation of its own AI. We're at a point now where it was almost like in the late 80s, early 90s, where we thought everyone should have their own database. And that was a new concept. And then we got to the digitization of organizations, and we felt like, well, some are going to need that, and others maybe not. Now the whole world is powered by the digital paradigm. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. AI is like electricity. It'll be infused in everything. And if you choose not to engage in building your own tools around the AI that fit your company and your industry, you will be dependent upon those who build them for you. And in some cases, that's okay. But in others, it's not. You need to have control over that type of process. So companies that aren't thinking about that now should absolutely be thinking about what do the AI tools custom to their organization look like.
Ok. Voltando para pessoas, você concordaria com a frase de que, principalmente por causa de inteligência artificial generativa e conversacional, todo mundo passou a ter uma nova igualdade na possibilidade de se tornar desigual? Como Io-Rei, ele é desigual, o cara da pizza. Totalmente desigual a outras pessoas, mas por quê? Porque ele encontrou uma possibilidade de se tornar completamente desigual, para a qual todos são iguais perante uns aos outros.
Yes. Within that space, technology has a two-sided paradigm of being able to create immense opportunity for the greater population, and at the same time concentrating opportunity and wealth in a very central location. You take a look at Google and the Microsofts of the world, they're only getting more powerful as a result of AI. They're not being disintermediated by it right now. There is an open source movement which I think will challenge that to some extent, but they'll never eliminate large Goliaths, and that's fine. But it also does create a possibility where there are people who exploit the market in a way where they do amass more potential and power. And honestly, the people who embrace this AI sooner and start to understand the paradigms at which they work with will gain an advantage. And this is not a panacea for inequality. I wish it was. I think it will create more opportunity for more people. But I also think, as I mentioned earlier, those benefits will be very unevenly distributed, especially to start. And then as it starts to diffuse across society, we will see more opportunities that look very different from the structures that we have today. I would love to say it's all about rising all boats, and I think as a net society benefit it will, but there will be people who are left behind by this. There's no question about that.
Ok, uma última pergunta para finalizar, Ian, porque a gente não tem mais tempo. Em 1930, John Maynard Keynes previu que em 100 anos, que é daqui a 7 anos, 2030, nós trabalharíamos 15 horas por semana. Considerando que esse aqui é um público misturado de tecnologia com o setor financeiro, talvez um grande número de pessoas aqui trabalhe 15 horas por dia. E a gente está tão longe de 15 horas por semana como a gente estava no começo da Revolução Industrial. Qual que é o impacto que essas tecnologias vão ter na quantidade de tempo que a gente vai trabalhar? Por exemplo, você falou que na sua companhia você não está demitindo ninguém, você está contratando mais gente para fazer coisas muito mais iradas. Eu estou fazendo a mesma coisa na TDS Company, onde a gente conseguiu quase que imediatamente, com uma semana de treinamento para as pessoas de conteúdo, que elas fizessem o dobro no mesmo tempo. Mas elas não vão trabalhar menos, elas vão fazer o dobro no mesmo tempo. Em algumas companhias eu acho que elas vão tentar fazer o quádruplo com as mesmas pessoas. E onde fica Keynes nessa história? Onde fica a nossa saúde física e mental?
That's a really important thing to investigate, because there will be different approaches to these new efficiencies. And some people will look at this and say, how can we do more in more time? Saying, hey, because you have this, you're going to be able to do more, be more effective, but you're going to work just as hard or harder because I want all of the efficiencies and gains. There will be some people who say, let's actually look at life balance and see how this can be a part of establishing that, and saying, we want to give you as much capability or more, but more balance within your life. And there are some people who will mix in between. There were studies recently where scientists used AI to perform scientific tests and examinations, and they were able to do exponentially more performances of tests in a short period of time, which was great. But it actually made more work for them, because at the end they had to analyze more results, spend more time with it to sift through the data, and then figure out what the implications are going to be. Now that'll change once data becomes part of the AI workflow for them too, but in the meantime, it made it so they had to work longer hours and more by using AI. So there will be a period of time where that actually happens for many of us. And some of us who, I love the work that I do, I don't mind working long hours and every single day. But not everybody wants that. So I think that there will be a spectrum. There will be people who lean into this and say, I want to do more, I want to put more time into this. Some who say, this is a dream, I want to work 3 days, 4 days a week, and still have the implications of what that full workload would look like. That is less a technology question and more of a society question. It's how are our corporations structured to support us as individuals, and what do they want to do with how they incorporate AI into the workplace, into the contracts that we have with each other. And that kind of sums up a lot of the challenges around technology. The technology itself has a neutral power. It can enhance both the good and the bad of the human spirit, but it's the way that we implement them that are either problematic or heroic. And when we take a look at what we do with society, it's what levers do we pull with that technology that makes all the difference.
Senhoras e senhores, como todos viram, Ian concorda que John Maynard Keynes, o grande economista, estava errado, está errado e estará errado o tempo todo se a gente não tomar cuidado. Eu queria agradecer a Ian a presença dele no FEBRABAN TECH 2023. Muito obrigado, Ian. Um grande prazer ter você aqui e até a próxima. Tchau, tchau. Glória, é com você.